All right. Hi, hello. Welcome to episode one. This is the Alchemists and Serendipity. I'm Michael Jewett. I'm here with you today to talk about all kinds of stuff. Um, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving me your time, and it's much appreciated. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. And let's just jump right into it. So, we come to points in our life where we discover we're kind of at a standstill. I don't really want to say stagnation, although we could interpret it that way. Um, it's more like a plateau, or walking through a forest and then coming to a clearing, and it's decision time. Where do we go? I like to call this is a bit of a like spiritual path when we have ended a certain story arc in our evolution, whatever that may be for you. I'll show you an example by saying uh, I just had about a year of healing from a long term relationship. Excuse me. A long term relationship. And now I've come full circle where I feel like, all right, this has ended. I'm more whole. I've found myself because I feel, depending, very much depending, I feel that after we leave a relationship, you kind of have to find your feet again, right? You kind of have to figure out who is the who that I see in the mirror now, where your actions and choices, they're all surrounding a specific kind of ecosystem that you've put together with this person. Again, depending. I mean, if it was a week long relationship, you probably don't have any kind of pillars to your daily, weekly routines that are put in place, right? Or any kind of that kind of rebuilding. Maybe there is, but um, there's a lot of emotional tethering too, I think, that goes on in a relationship. The longer you're with somebody, and I will note that it doesn't always have to be long, it can be a short period as long as when you two dive into each other, if you will, you go deep, if that makes sense. I've had some longer, honestly, a longer one longer relationship than the one that just ended. And I will tell you, it was not as deep. It was shallow. And that really comes at however who you are in the relationship and who the other person is in the relationship and how you two share that experience. Could be shallow for both of you. Could be shallow for one and deep for the other. So, take that as it may. I've come to a place in my life, as one does, where a relationship ended. Over the course of the last year, it I have really dived into myself. I've really given a lot of focus to myself. I've really taken time to look back on old relationships, who I was in those relationships, who did I choose to be my person in those relationships. And that's an interesting one. I think it really explains a lot about the radar system, if you will, of who we are by who we decide is worthy of our love, right? And that we're worthy of them. I remember watching this little study. I'm trying to remember now. I think it was a TED talk, but I'm not positive. But what they did is they had, I believe it was 10 males and 10 females, and they put them in these like bodysuits, so there wasn't any, how do I put it? There was like no cosmetic things going on, no fashion. It was purely just looking at each other's facial features, and their body sculpture. And people were had a number that was put on their head, and this was like their rating. And what they were supposed to do was walk around in this room, and no talking or anything like that, but based on the number on the person's head, and I want to say attraction level too, um, but I think mostly it was to the number on the head, that they were to choose their partner. And I want to say the vast majority all picked the same number or very, very close to it, which is interesting that within us, we're compelled to pick a mate, if you will, um, like that, where we look at them, we observe them, we experience them first, and then make these calculations, subconsciously or consciously, that like, yes, this person would be good for me. So when we have a breakup, uh, that's that you have created or the other person, we go through that stage, right, of reviewing the relationship. At least I hope you do, because it's one of the best things that you can do, for yourself, for your healing, and for your future partner. Nobody wants to drag, excuse me, old patterns, old behaviors, um, old wounds into new relationships. Now, I would also say that with this caveat that you don't always get that choice, right? We could be doing all the healing and feel like, wow, this is the best energy I've ever been in my body, and now it's time to go and renew my love out there in the dating world. And then after a few months, you're doing the same thing, or you realize you picked the same partner again, right? Or something comes up that showcases your insecurities or whatever. So I would caution everybody. It doesn't matter how much healing you do. It does in one sense of like introspection and helping aid in your choice making, but that doesn't mean that you get to scrub that insecurity away from your personality and your experiences for the rest of your life. A wound is a wound. Healed or not, you'll still be able to recognize it there from time to time, right? I broke my wrist as a kid. It's healed, but I still know that it's there, if that makes sense. And, that's maybe not the best metaphor, but in my mind it makes sense. Uh, I really came in guns blazing there, and now I've pooped out a little bit. So I'm in the season of asking myself, who am I now? What am I about? I remember a teacher telling me before that great answers come from great questions. They don't have to be complex. Some of the best things are simple questions. Some of the best answers, excuse me, come from simple questions. It doesn't have to be, space, time, and discovering the spiritual kingdom that there is within each of us. It doesn't have to be that deep. It just has to be a great question for you and for your experience. I think, I presume You let me know in the comments if it's true or not. But I presume that we all come to these clearings, if you will, in our development, in our journey of life, where we say, who am I now? Because our identities are so closely connected to what our purpose is, which is connected to the value of the day. I don't really want to say our value because I think that's an objective thing, and it really doesn't have it, it's not in this conversation, but how we individually value our day. And I would say even the way we hold judgments on other people uh, based on our own value system. Like, hey, Hank over here, he just gets drunk every day and doesn't do anything else. We might not value that much, right? Another person who's looking at that is like, who's super stressed out and never gets to have any fun, and they see that this person, to them, it's not that he gets drunk every day, but the interpretation is he's freer and is enjoying his time, So perspective is everything. Let me dial back here. In these places, in these clearings, I think it's such a beautiful blessing, such an opportunity to discover yourself again. I was talking earlier today, and I was referencing that, when you plant a plant, flower or vegetable, whatever, it's always the same plant. You don't plant a pumpkin and then somewhere along the lines it becomes a tree. You don't plant a dandelion and somewhere along the lines it becomes tuna, right? It's always going to be a pumpkin. It's always going to be a dandelion, right? Even in the seed, in the stems, in the leaves, whether it's blooming or not, or produces fruit, it's still that seed. It's still a pumpkin seed. It's still a dandelion seed. And my point to that is, through your adventure of life, you're going through this journey of evolution, if you will. And in that process, you will wear many faces of you. Faces, costumes, identities. There's lots of different ways that you can put it. My point being is that you're always going to be you. You'll always be you. And that's a part of healing too, because I think some of us feel at some point we'll be healed enough, we won't be us anymore. We'll be the better version. We'll be X, Y, and Z. And I think in that, you've put yourself in this unhealthy paradox loop of that if I just, then I can. If I am this, then I will receive whatever. I will have this experience. You're never allowing yourself to have the experience that you actually want, or the experience that you believe you deserve. You're constantly putting it in the future instead of allowing yourself to have it. I understand that can be a little confusing, and I'll go into that on another episode, I think, but I'm just trying to lay the groundwork here of what I want, not what I want, but what I'm bringing to the table in this podcast. We're all on a journey. There's a lot of propaganda towards many a thing in the world. And as I've grown up, I have always kind of longed for a voice out there that was saying all the things that I was thinking. And at times I would get pieces of things, this, that, or the other, whether it be from entertainment, uh, a philosophy, a philosophy book, um, or whatever. Uh, but to just have good conversation going on where we are dissecting the experience, the human experience. The reason that I named this podcast The Alchemists and Serendipity, there's a couple of reasons. One, I've been working on a website and a business called The Alchemists and Serendipity for many years now. And so I was like, this is what it's going to be. It doesn't matter. But the concept has, in that title and that name, I chose for many reasons. In An alchemist is somebody who creates magic out of the ordinary. They're scientists, if you will, where they are using everyday magic to create things. Now, I'm altering the definition a little bit if you go and look up alchemist, but that's my definition of it, okay? Alchemy is the changing of material through experimentation. Us, as assumedly human beings, if you're aliens out there, just raise your hand. Through our journey, we are experimenting on things, are we not? When we were children, we would play and pretend. We would adopt a thinking, a character, and we would play as them with other kids, assumedly. I mean, maybe we all didn't do that. That's something that I did, though. Right? And that's what made games fun. We weren't us for a little bit. We pretended to be something else. We were loggers. We were soldiers. We were sorcerers. We were whatever. And I feel like that same kind of concept is what we do in life. When we get into high school, especially, I don't know what it's like around the world, but for the America, we're given a lot of information and direction to choose, become something. What are you going to do when you go out into society and you're an adult and you have to provide for yourself? Or one day, if you're lucky and you have a family, how will you provide for them? How is it, you're going to be a great capitalistic pillar in the community? Now, putting all that kind of stuff aside, in the identity part of the experience of living, I think that really showcases what I'm talking about who are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? All of us, I think, at one point or another, work jobs we really don't care for. Maybe you're at one right now, or maybe you were at it earlier today, or maybe you are going to be going to it later on today. This is what I'm saying. You're here experiencing the world. And in my own personal philosophy, you're a spirit who's come into this body, and all of these things, these sources that are here, schools, bosses, society leaders, the government, they're all pointing out, expressing who you should be, what's accepted. Along the way, those are kind of the bumpers that I think take us down certain pathways, lay out a certain map of life, of shoulds and whatnot. I have not, I definitely have followed them, I would say, to a degree, but I've also found along the journey that when I'm most happy, when I'm most fulfilled, I am working towards things that I believe in. Now, that changes. Um, what I believed in when I was 7 is not quite what I believe in now. Why? Because I have more experience now. I've seen the way things work out for me. Now, that doesn't mean that, what the way I experience something is not the way that you experience something. That goes back to the whole perspective is a very important thing, because the navigation that I have internally that tells me this is good or this is bad or this is worthwhile and this is not the same for other people. I presume. I'm taking a drink of coffee now, so take this time to take a drink of something delicious. My story arc just changed. Um, Last year, I stepped out of a long-term relationship, one of the best ones uh, in many parts of a relationship um, that I've ever been in. And in other ways, it was very much the same as other relationships. And in some ways, it was worse than other relationships. In the last year, I have devoted time to understanding myself because I felt, excuse me, because I felt that that was what was most important. That was what I needed. That continuing to experience this fallout from, excuse me, this fallout after relationships don't work out, that I just didn't want to do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not interested in that. You know, and so rather than blame the environment, rather than blame my my ex-partner, rather than excuse anything, I've it was about confronting behavior because that's mine, right? I can't do anything about the other person's conduct. It's about mine. What was I doing? What was I not doing? What am I allowing and not allowing to come into my life or be a part of my life? I felt like I had finally gotten to a point, because I will tell you, in my younger years, there were times where I ended a relationship and I would simply be like, fuck that. That was not my fault. That was their fault. And I'm going to prove it by getting into another relationship with a wonderful person that I will find today. And of course, that did not work out because there was no healing that was done. I didn't learn anything. I didn't allow myself to see that I had done wrong, even if wasn't anything climactic and devious intent or anything within the relationship, but functionally within the romance, within the choosing of the partner, within how I reacted to things, or whatever it may have been. I did not give myself the time to review the relationship from my point of view, because for me personally, it was very much they did it. They were the crappy person because I did all these things in my book that said how to be a good romantic partner, right? I think when we really start to mature in romance is when we start seeing, or rather accepting, that our little book of laws within love can be wrong. We can realize and accept that this little book that we hold internally, subconsciously, was built when we were children. Well, what was going on in your life when you were a child? Was it safe? Did you have lots of great examples of love? And perhaps some of those seemed like they were, um, but created behaviors that did not support what it was that you were actually looking for, what you were actually seeking. I realized after many failed relationships as a younger man that I was choosing lovers um, out of a bad context. I wasn't trying to meet somebody at where I was, but rather I was getting, um, when someone would pursue me, I would immediately just feel so loved because the well for me being happy with myself by myself was nil. Like it felt like I wasn't worthy of anything. The reason I'm alone, or always I'm just a monster, and that's why nobody loves me and I can't be with anybody. Right? That was kind of my logic as a child. Um, and when I was first joining the dating world, it took a lot of time to realize that just because somebody gives you some affection, somebody gives you some attention, somebody is there for you once or twice, doesn't mean that those people are good people. It also took being in a relationship with a very manipulative woman to show me that that can also happen. Like getting completely floored in a relationship, um, believing that somebody was, you know, on this pedestal that you had in your mind of whatever, that they could just do no wrong, and then getting manipulated because of that, because it's naive. Anybody can do wrong. Everybody is unperfect. Everybody has insecurities, has flaws. Everyone is going to fail you in love at some point. And so to create this belief, this vision that whomever you fall in love with is never going to hurt you, is always going to be supportive of all the things, right? You're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up to get your legs swept out from under you, because this is the way of the naive lover. We are living in a fantasy land that it's all of these things and it's none of this other stuff. That person didn't work out just because they were actually secretly a terrible person. That doesn't have to be true, right? Perhaps you put them on a pedestal and never recognized all the little red flags, or mediocre red flags, right? Like all the orange and yellow flags that they were showing. Like I think there actually is representation for those things in psychology and or relationship stuff. I don't know what they are, but you know, I'm just trying to say, like, things that weren't out in your face saying, "Oh, this person is not well," or does not treat people well, and so I should not be with them, or they're not. They don't know how to this, that, or the other. I'm not going to throw any details out there, but whatever it happens to be, it's a learning curve in dating. At least it was for me, in understanding that things just don't work out sometimes. However, I think there is things that we can do. We can sit and learn about ourselves. Why was it that my radar decided that this girl, this guy was the one for me and that they were going to do no wrong or whatever. Did I have a unrealistic belief on romance? Did I choose to overlook something that the inner voice within me was saying, "Hey, stop. Did you see what they just did? Did you can you tell within your body that yourself is saying, I don't like that, but you're writing it off or you're stuffing it down or you're playing little so that you don't disrupt things that are going on because you just don't want to be alone anymore? Hmm? These are things to think about. Good questions. They don't have to be complex, but they just have to be a good question. And being a good scientist is somebody who asks good questions, does experiments, and follow through. When I was a younger man and I was dating, I did not do any of those things. And I think a lot of us do that too. We adopt systems of romance from the media, from movies, from stories, and sometimes from our caretakers and friends. So it's nothing to, I would say, it's nothing to guilt or shame ourselves over. Everything can be learned, right? Or relearned. We can always adopt a new way of doing something, but it takes us doing the work. You got to sit with yourself and ask questions. And sometimes, like, Mike, what kind of questions am I supposed to ask myself? I don't know, bro. I could list some stuff, but really it's you going down that hallway in your inner sanctum to find out why you do the things you do. Why did you choose that guy even though you could completely tell that he was very aggressive every encounter that you were in? Maybe it wasn't as loud. And so, okay, that's something, I didn't register that he was actually a very aggressive dude. I thought he was confident. Oh, well, what does confident look like to you? And this is what we do. When I will admit that I have not done any uh, therapy with another person. Um, I have, well, I take that back. I guess I have. Um, but as far as relationships goes, well, no, that's not completely true either. I will say that the majority of the therapy that I've gotten has come from books, has come from reading and watching therapies go on, and taking that information and using it on myself. And I think we don't have to have somebody there to talk to and bounce things off of. I think it does help, and that in a lot of areas, you do need that. You want that. If anything, just to have another perspective bouncing uh, their information off of your question. And it can be difficult to trust people in doing that, right? At least that's been my issue. But if we're willing to start the process of going, okay, this relationship ended, what was my part, right? And you start by looking back on the arguments or the big ones, right? And I would stress to look at the small stuff. The big things are usually big for a reason, but the big things don't always happen, right? And what am I trying to say here? The small things are the lead up. And so that's what you should be looking at. What was the little things that got under your skin? That has to do with you. What were the little things that you missed? So much of the time, I think we're very grateful in a manner to have somebody with us. And in that, we excuse behavior and choices that our lovers make to keep the relationship going. And I think that's fine to a degree if we are managing at the same time to ask questions and have a space within the relationship where there is communication going on, that where I can go, hey, I need to bring something to your attention about the way you're treating me, or that when this happens you always do A, B, or C, and that's not okay. Every relationship has to happen. Every relationship needs to have that in it. Without having a whoops, I accidentally muted myself. Without having that, there's no back and forth. There has to be a bridge of communication, and I'm not talking about just your daily I love yous and texting and messaging with each other or sharing stupid funny videos. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in a relationship, there should be a time and space clarified between the two of you where you guys can settle when the funk happens, right? Because it's the little stuff that builds up and breaks down a vehicle. It's the little stuff that builds up over time and creates the big things. If somebody in little ways is stepping past your boundary or disrespecting you or being aggressive, that is just a slow hill. And at some point, they learn that I could take this as far as I want. Maybe it's not that intentional, right? Maybe it's not that malicious. But I would argue and debate and suggest that subconsciously it is, because I just feel like that's the way humans work. When speaking of work, all right, comparatively, I think some work can be done solo. You don't need to have a manager or a team leader or whatever. You don't need to have them there to get all things done in every manner of work, vocation that's out there. Sometimes it even makes more sense for people to just do solo work. However, it really relies on that worker's system for getting things done. What aids a company's output and success in reaching goals or standards is having that manager there, is having that team lead there, barring that they're providing things. In the same manner of being in a romantic relationship where you two have worked out that, like, hey, when we have trouble, can we sit on the blue couch? And that will be our safe space. That will be our safe time for us to educate each other and share our feelings, where it doesn't feel as safe everywhere else, like on the ride to work or right before or right after work or this or that, because after work I'm really tired, I would prefer not to go deep into a conversation or whatever it may be. And maybe it is that, like, hey, I'm going to say the password or, our code word, and then we need to take 10 minutes to just eye contact and talk. And please hold my hand so that I know you're here with me. Whatever the action is, whatever the space needs for you two to create safety. there creates a time where each individual can share information, and so there's growth. Being in this place of walking out of the forest and having the clearing, we're then our vision is flooded with opportunities of where to go, right? And how do you access that? How do you choose that without sitting with yourself and talking, asking questions? Well, what do we want? Well, what do we need? Well, where have we been? So that we can assess what is the priority in life. In work, having these leaders, having these managers, in my opinion, what they're there for is to train, to create safe space in hearing the information the individual, or giving information to the individual, like, hey Hank, I really need you to stop spitting in the food. I know you think it's funny, but that's really not our standard, right? It's I know that's a little out there, but I'm just making some kind of metaphor. We have to have a place where we can say, hey, you're hurting me. What you're doing is hurting, right? Managers and team leaders in a workspace environment, they are the elected officials, if you will, by the company, by the higher management that says, hey, this person we feel confident in explaining and taking care of other employees, by that they have the confidence and the soft hands, if you will, to inform the employees of what's going wrong or what's going right, and that they do so with heart. Because you don't want a drone at work. You don't want somebody who's just going to stonewall people or give information coldly or abrasively. You need someone who has a very parental energy. Hey, I realized you're having some trouble out there talking to tables. Would you like to sequence some examples with me as customer server? Hey, I realize you think it's pretty funny spitting in all the food, but that's really disgusting. We have to be able to have a space. We have to be able to have a bridge of communication between each other so that growth happens. Inevitably, if the goal is one person for the rest of our lives, that person is not going to be the same person down the road, right? Like a planted seed, they're going to keep growing. And you want that. You want the best for your partner, right? You want them to grow. You want them to get, in my opinion at least, when I get with somebody, I want them to get all they can get out of life. And I really, so much so that it's been hindering for myself, do all I can to support them and provide a fertile ground for them to grow. If there's no space, if there's no time, which is devotion, and time and focus, effort, that's devotion. If there's no space, no devotion to your partner in that communication, you're not going to grow. Eventually, the system that is you two, because both of you are creating this ecosystem within your relationship, if there's no communication, if there's no safe space that's providing the light on these subjects that may be hard to talk about, may be hard to share, may be hard to point out to your partner, hey, you're hurting me, there can't be growth. Eventually, the relationship dies. Because like a plant, like a business, in order for things to grow, we have to water them. So we have to give, there has to be a source of giving, right? But you also have to prune plants. You have to weed them. You have to make sure they're not getting cluttered by other plants so that they can't get the light to grow. Well, that's what happens in work with bad habits. If you allow employees to have bad habits, can you tell that I've been a manager before? If you allow employees to have bad habits and your team leaders and your managers don't talk and bring that up and nip it in the butt right away, it grows. Then other employees adopt the bad habits, and the system starts to fail. The same can be said in romance, that if you and your partner, who are the managers of the relationship, both of you, if you are not, I'm not saying critiquing, but sharing your experience with the other on an emotional level and a mental level, the relationship is not going to grow. You have to be able to allow the other person to grow in your shared experience. That only happens when we're sharing with each other, and provided that change happens. If you go and share with your partner and no change happens, the relationship can still die, because communication alone is not enough, right? Loving somebody is not enough. If you love somebody and all they do is hurt you, that's not any good, right? If you love somebody but you're never feeling seen, you're never feeling like you're also receiving devotion that you're giving the relationship, you're giving to this partner, that's just going to build resentment, separation, anxiety, etc. On and on and on, all the negative, ugly stuff, and you don't want that. So, I'm going to wrap up here because I think I've said enough on that. As we've come to this space, and maybe you're there too, your story arc for your character, if you will, has come to this place, this clearing. You've walked a great distance. You've traveled space and time. Now you've arrived here. And the question is asked, what's next? Well, how do you decide that? Assess your relationship with yourself and the world. Where are you now? Who are you now? Who were you? I'm going to close out with this. We're all on different paths. We're here living together on this big, beautiful planet in space and time, and your life is yours. So I recommend you get the most out of it. And now, I'm not saying that means just the good stuff. I mean all of it. Like my music taste, a person's experience in the world has to have the entire wheel of stuff. The good, the bad, the easy, the hard. All of these things make the flavor, the context of your spiritual book in this experience of thing called life. It's all important. So we have to do the hard work sometimes, which is asking ourselves questions, being the detective. We make magic by believing in it and doing in the work. You reach hard goals by, one, just setting them, finding them. There were times in my life where I was stuck on just dark, lonely, stressful pictures of what life was for me. It took time and it took development to create different pictures in my head, different goals to search for. I believe you can do that too. But you gotta believe it. It starts with belief. Before we can manifest it into anything else, before we can get a pizza to our house, we have to believe we can go get it or order it. But that doesn't happen until you believe that it can happen and you do the work. I mean, I guess if you deliver DoorDash, you're paying other people to do work, but you had to do work to get that money, right? You had to put in the order. So put in the order of your life. Put in the order of what you're going to be now. All right. I love me. I love what I've been doing. I forgive myself for making mistakes. I forgive myself for having insecurities. I forgive myself for not having all the resources, for not having all the tools and skills to create or attract the romantic abundance, or, if it's not about romance for you right now, just manifesting the life that you want, that you dream of. So, if you're in this clearing like I am, or like I've been, I suggest discover yourself and what the future could be by sitting, assessing, who am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And where am I going? I really appreciate everybody that sat and listened, or ran and listened, or worked and listened, or if you're catching this on YouTube and you're just watching, or whatever. I'm very thankful. I've kept myself from doing things like this for a long time for just not believing in myself. And this year became the year that I said yes. Who knows what it will come to be? But it takes believing and choosing to do something. I hope you can find that too. Y'all have a good day.